welcome Delaney Young, our mayor.
Hi, everybody. I took some notes because I did have several meetings today and I wanted to make sure that I was here in the moment and had some reminders. Thank you for starting us off that way. What that did for me was remind me that every breath we take feeds our Mother Earth, and that is how I do refer to our planet a lot of the time. And so thank you. I think that that was a wonderful way to start this. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm very happy to see so many people here. I am the newly elected mayor of Telluride. Thank you, everybody, who in here helped make that happen. A little on my background, when I was at college, I studied political science, and my focus was on environmental science and civil rights law. So I have been an advocate and a warrior, I think, for the planet for a very long time, so it means a lot to me to be here today. Solutions. These meetings and these events that are going to take place are about solutions. Few things in this world have a simple solution, and the climate crisis that our planet is enduring is a perfect example of that. There is no one answer that is going to reverse or stop the negative actions that are happening on our planet right now. So it's going to take a multifaceted approach. It's going to take many varied organizations and people to bring ideas forward to make real, concrete, creative solutions occur. And it's going to be more than one solution. I'm very grateful that Madeline and Alex have brought all of these folks together. We currently have several organizations, not only in town, but in the community and in surrounding communities that are focused on helping with environmental issues and climate change and climate crisis. There are so many ways to define what's happening. I use crisis because I feel that's where we are. We are in crisis mode, and we have to do something last year. So we're that far behind. We're way farther behind than that. So thank you to everybody for being here, and everybody who's here obviously is concerned and interested, and thank you for coming. Please remember to sign the paper that is going around if you're interested in getting more information and attending more events. And let's work together. I'm all about collaboration, and this is bringing all these groups together to have action. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so there's a lot we want to offer, and we also want to be hearing from you. So we're going to follow this sort of flow, and you hopefully have index cards on your seat. As you have questions, you can jot them down, and when we get to the panel conversation part, we'll be taking questions from the audience. We thought it would be useful to start off because there might be varying levels of understanding and even knowing who's doing what in our region, to really start off with this part of the panel, sharing really some history of the region. Chris will share. Adam is going to help us understand better why it is a crisis. And then Kim is going to help us understand what our goals are and what the action plans are to get there. And then we'll proceed into the rest of the panel. There's an illustrious panel assembled, so I asked them each to send me some notes, and I'll just give a brief intro to each of these folks. Chris Holstrom, what doesn't she do? She's just, I hope there's like a Lifetime Achievement Award for you, seriously.
I'm still living.
But in this seat right here, she's one of our San Miguel County Commissioners. She was the Regional Sustainability Coordinator and Director of Eco Action Partners. She co-founded and is board president of the Southwest Institute for Resilience, and she's on the committee for Colorado Counties for Climate Action as well. She has a bachelor's in forest management and a master's in horticulture. And there's a lot more we could share about Chris. Kim is on that side to switch seats. She is the interim director for Eco Action Partners, and thank you for stepping into that role. She's a longtime energy specialist for Eco Action Partners, and self-proclaimed data geek, energy geek. Phenomenal amount of data this woman and her team have been collecting for 10 years. And that's part of what got me so excited to really convene us all. So there could be more understanding of how much baseline data we already have as a community, really thanks to Kim and her team. So she's also got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and she owns an energy services business, right, and does energy audits. Okay, onto this side.
You gonna do Adam?
Skip that. That's okay.
Oh, I did. I thought I did.
It's all right.
It's okay.
Thank you, because I had you in a different order for it. Adam, I've never heard the term, but I love it. Volunteer scientist and co-founder of Pinhead Climate Institute. So
Yep.
what other town has a volunteer scientist around? It's remarkable. He has really helping to implement town-level climate action plans as well. So in other words, not just the theory, but helping us as a community be implementing, including working closely with Kim and Eco Action Partners, and has a Master of Environmental Management from the Yale School of Forestry, among other accolades. Thank you, Adam, for being here. Now on to the side. We're going to start with Megan Eno. She is our new forest ranger. Woohoo!
Very glad to be here.
We are thrilled. I think it might be one of the first times that we have a U.S. Forest Service representation at an event like this, and it just makes all the difference in the world.
With
So
a changing agency, I suspect you'll see a lot more of that. So very glad to be here. Thank you.
thank you very much. And
Big position.
I got some stuff, no worries. Let me see, there was a lot too, but you're coming to us from
The Mantle
region.
LaSalle.
Yeah.
Just
So-
across the border.
Nice. And it sounds like you have also experience and a passion for partnership and working in community, which thank you for that. And a master's degree in planning from Florida State University. That's right. Yay. And then beside her, we have Wiley Freeman, who we are very blessed to have be part of San Miguel Power Association. As you might know, we're just really, it's phenomenal, the work we're doing and what they're offering. And our resource table, you can find out more about their programs, and we'll share too. But he has been with SMPA for almost 8 years. Got his start in the energy field, designing and installing solar panels, I love that, and making biodiesel from waste veggie oil with Shiprock Builders. I didn't know this. Steep Rock Builders. Very cool. And then at SMPA, you oversee the energy efficiency, renewable energy, and weatherization programs. Thank you. And then to Wiley's side here, we have Jeff Coteau. Thank you. And he's been a very busy man, and we're greatly appreciating that you could make the time to be here today. Thank you. It matters a lot. Jeff is Vice President, Mountain Operations and Planning for Telluride Ski and Golf. He's been there almost, I think, 32 years, 33 years.
He's not that old.
Wait, I am.
He's aging well. And he's just been phenomenal as far as Telski having a sustainability awareness for a long time and addressing issues really before they became mainstream. For example, wetlands restoration, and with the ski area expansion, really having an awareness of the importance to be considering and factoring in sustainability impacts too. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here. And then David Averill, what a pleasure to meet you in person. David is the Executive Director for SMART, and that's San Miguel.
Authority for Regional Transportation.
So, transportation, thank you. And he's got a bachelor's degree in environmental studies, 20-year track record of working at the local, regional, and statewide levels. And just am thrilled that you were so quick to say yes to this.
Of course.
I know it can be very hard to make time.
Anytime.
And I greatly appreciate it. And that prior to SMART, you just were loving being involved with other sort of transit initiatives, including bicycling and other ways to move people around.
A multimodal transportation planner by trade.
Awesome. Yay. Well, thank you and welcome all. So we're going to start really with this flow that we had talked about. Adam, if you would, help us understand better why it is a climate crisis.
Sure. Talk a little bit about that. So I'm the volunteer climate scientist. The reason why I always keep that in my, because I volunteer with the Pinhead Climate Institute. I don't get paid for my work there, but I'm also a climate scientist during the day for the Department of Agriculture. So I spend a lot of time working with farmers, ranchers, and private forest landowners on climate solutions. So let's see if I can figure out how to
Get
navigate
those slides.
the slides.
There's only one foot on there.
Let's see there, and then we'll go here, and then we'll go there, and then we'll go here, and we'll see if we can succeed.
Beautiful.
All right, there we go. So there's a picture of our planet from space, right?
It's not flat.
Well,
Touche.
very good. So this is just for perspective. Sometimes I talk to people about the scale of the planet and the atmosphere, right? We're going to talk about the atmosphere a lot tonight, and then how the atmosphere influences our planet, and our planet has a unique atmosphere. If you think about a basketball, and then you think about the thickness of a piece of paper, that's kind of to scale the Earth versus the thickness of the atmosphere. So the atmosphere is really thin compared to the Earth, but we're going to talk all about the atmosphere at least for a few minutes here. So bear with me. I like to nerd out on that. Let's see. So a lot of people say we're the first generation to understand this problem of climate change, and we're the last with the ability to solve it. And I subscribe to this. I use this slide pretty often. And I do believe that we, as a community, the folks that inhabit the planet right now, including the little ones, and maybe the older ones, I'll speak for myself, not anyone else, have the obligation to give our planet to future generations in a better shape than it is right now. So just a little quick atmospheric science for you, because I love to nerd out on this. Scale, remember everything we're looking at there. So you've got the troposphere, the stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, exosphere. What's outside of that? Space, right. And our planet is unique in that we have this atmosphere, and that's what keeps the planet warm, right? So the greenhouse effect, as we know it, is really beneficial. And that's the reason why we have evolved to live on this planet. But the scale, as I mentioned, the slide looks is a little bit out of scale. It's the atmosphere is not that big compared to the planet. So let's talk about greenhouse gases just for a second. 3 main greenhouse gases that we deal with are carbon dioxide. People are probably really familiar with that one. Nitrous oxide. Anybody else know what that is? It's laughing gas, right? But in much smaller concentrations in the atmosphere, it's a greenhouse gas. So it holds heat, and it also affects the stratospheric ozone. We remember the hairspray kind of concerns of the 80s. And then it wasn't nitrous oxide, it was CFCs, but affects the same piece of the atmosphere. Then you got methane, and we often think of cows and methane. Has everybody heard kind of methane? Cows, where does the methane come from in a cow? Come on. No, you're wrong. 80% comes out of the mouth. Right, so it comes out of the mouth. Methane comes out mostly out of the mouth and in the manure management. So enteric fermentation. And they have multiple stomachs and they ruminate. So a cow eats about 8 hours a day, ruminates about 8 hours a day, and sleeps about 8 hours a day. So they give off. But there are a lot of other sources of methane as well. Uh-oh.
Melting permafrost.
Melting permafrost, exactly. You got a positive feedback loop there, right? And then all these gases, you can see them kind of interspersed. We get solar radiation comes in, heats up the planet, that re-radiates at night, right? And then these gases hold that re-radiation of the heat in, and that's what keeps our planet habitable. We get too many of these gases in the atmosphere, though. They hold more heat in, right? Is it the end of the world? No, it's not. The world's going to continue on. It's 4 billion years old. But for our children, for our grandchildren, what we are doing to the planet, the amount of gases we're putting into the atmosphere is changing the temperature of the planet very quickly. And it's changing it in a way that's negative. We go through cycles through that 4 billion years, granted, but not in 150 years do we change temperatures like we are now. So, and we monitor this, right? We as humans kind of go back in time, and we've monitored CO2, and you can see in this, this is from last week, February 17th, 2020. These are, kind of what is this? This is 2 years of concentrations, and you've got daily averages, weekly averages, monthly averages, and you see the cycle, the emissions in the atmosphere, and then you see the trough coming down. What's happening with the trough coming down?
It's staying high.
That's actually the northern hemisphere's summer. And so if you look at that, that's photosynthetic activity, pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere. So we have emissions, and then CO2 comes out of the atmosphere. That's kind of our opportunity to draw down. There's the book, the Drawdown book back there. It's kind of trying to capitalize on that downturn that we know happens every year. And then over time, we can see the trajectory of this. And I see Sarah in the audience. You've been to Mauna Loa, right?
Yeah, we have that bottle and it was 407 and that was just, 4 years ago.
407, and now we're over 410,
Yeah.
right? So
Oh,
look
so
at this
sad.
steepness of this curve since 1960, when Keeling decided to put this monitoring station out in this pristine area. So the carbon dioxide concentrations are increasing, the nitrous oxide concentrations are increasing, and the methane concentrations are increasing in the atmosphere. And all of this is holding heat in the atmosphere. So what about us in Telluride? So Norway's got a carbon footprint on an annual basis per capita of like 4.8 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. The US has an average of 16.5 per capita. So if you take the whole US emissions, disperse it by our population, the US is 16.4 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. Telluride, we've got a small population, we have transients that come in and out, and we've got a fairly big carbon footprint compared to the population. So this is what we want to trim down. Let's make our carbon footprint smaller. And that's what the esteemed audience up here is going to talk about today, is how we take that big carbon footprint and move it into solutions. And that's just my little quick climate change primer. And I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a dip into the science. And like I said, I think we're the last generation with the ability to solve this major problem. And here are your leaders. So thank you.
Adam, that was the best summary Telluride. Thank you. Chris, if you would help us know, there's been a lot of amazing work that's been happening here through the years. If you could help us have a sense of that and who's done what, and please let's call out anyone that we see in the audience.
Well, it's like most of the audience, which is awesome. I mean, I think one of the things that we are so privileged to live here that does give us the responsibility to do, in my mind, everything we can to make it a better place for the next generations. It's so cool to have that little one here. And so I've been here 33 years now. It's starting to make me an old timer. In about, 2004 or 2005, there was an article in the local Planet, actually in the Daily Planet, about how we were going to be getting, as a county, we were going to be getting all this oil and gas money coming in. That was when they were starting to open up some of the gas fields. And Kathy Green and myself and Betsy McKinney at the time got together and said, wouldn't it be great if we could use those funds to further sustainability efforts and not further oil and gas efforts? And so we kind of had a little group, and then it got to be a bigger group, and came up with the idea of having a government-funded organization or group that would tackle the sustainability deal. At the time then, none of the governments really wanted to house it, and it was decided to kind of go after a nonprofit. I'd stepped out of the sort of the inner circle at that time and applied for the job and felt really fortunate to be the first director. It was called the New Community Coalition, started, and now it's Eco Action Partners. So that started in 2007, and I was the ED for 7 years until the end of 2013. In the meantime, so we were working on sustainability, and I kind of had free reign, which was really great. So we could do energy, we could do food, we could do waste, we could do almost anything that caught my attention, which was really fun. And then we started to narrow it down a little and get a little more into some of the details. And Kim was actually my first hire, and so it's been great to have that consistency of information and data gathering. But in the meantime, we have so many other organizations and people in this community, and like I say, it's almost everybody here, from Vicki Phelps teaching on the West End and working with the Telluride Institute, and Lee Taylor, Planning Commission, part of Telluride Institute, We have Sarah with Pinhead and now Pinhead Climate Institute. We have Joanna Canal with Carbon Neutral Coalition, which we tried, this is a couple years ago, we got some funding from Planet Bluegrass, and trying to bring the multitude of organizations together that have a finger in this pie, and trying to see what each of us is doing, how we can, what's missing, and this is still part of our ongoing effort, and how we can amplify what each other is doing. We have the governments with the Ecology Commission and the Green Team up in the village. Let's say so many different partners. With that length of time, we've gone from San Miguel Power Association being a less than supportive organization to being a leader in going after renewable energy and becoming a collaborative partner in so many things. So I'm undoubtedly forgetting. We have Stacy helping the Earth Guardians, the 5th, 6th, 7th graders who really don't have as much patience with our excuses, and that's a good thing, So Karen G. from the town, Jenny working on all of our water issues. I mean, we just have an amazing community. Even Michael from our marketing. So he's here because he knows it's important, and I think that's what makes me excited to continue to work on this, and to see all the folks here, because what we're really after, in my mind, is I think we're at a really critical moment. It is an emergency or a crisis, but we are also, I think, at a critical mass with people in this community and the regional community to do things, and that's why I think we're here. It's like, what can we do? How can we amplify the organizations already working on stuff? How can we fill gaps, identify and then fill gaps of things that need to be done? And then particularly, you'll hear this probably several times, call every one of us and your friends and neighbors and your kids and everyone to action. Whether the action is huge, like not owning a car and biking everywhere, or not buying clothes. I've seen new clothes. I've seen that for people, or helping educate the next generation and give them the power to do the things that we haven't been able to do. So that's a real quick arc of what's happened in our community to get us here to this point. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. I actually moved here before Chris got hired to be the director of Eco Action Partners, knowing that the organization was going to get started, and then called her up 2 days after she got hired and said, "Can I work for you yet? Can I work for you yet?" So about a week later, she said, "Yes, come help me." So anyway, I'm very grateful to be here. As part of my early position with the organization, we got some grant funding, and we formed the Snuffles Energy Board across Ouray and San Miguel counties. That was a state-funded grant opportunity that gave us funding to initiate a greenhouse gas inventory, a sustainability action plan for the region, and to really, move things forward and bring people together. That organization is still collaborating. It involves all of the governments across the region. SMPA has been a representative from the start as well, and then we have citizens groups represented, and we're constantly expanding the involvement. As part of the state level efforts at that time, we adopted goals to be consistent with the state, and that was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 20% by 2020 and 80% by 2050. And we chose 2010 levels because we were just starting to track emissions and energy use across the region. A couple governments had been tracking it before that, but we didn't have regional data. Within the sustainability action plan that we created, we focused on these 7 different categories. Community engagement, part of that is what's going on right now with all of you here in the room. Energy consumption, reducing our energy use. Increasing our renewable energy. Decreasing our emissions associated with transportation, and that's both vehicle emissions as well as air travel. Decreasing our water consumption. Diverting waste from the landfill through reduction, recycling, and composting. And then focusing on agriculture and forests, utilizing our regional natural resources wisely, and also increasing local food production. Within our Sustainability Action Plan, there are over 100 different actions that focus on different categories here. They are community level, they are government level, and some are specific to a jurisdiction. We are going to be working this next year on 2020 to determine where we're at with accomplishing those and setting our updated plan up for us to accomplish goals going into the future. So I'm going to show you just a few charts. This is a summary of presentations that I give to the governments in the fall to show where we're at when I update data every year. I'm not going to go into these much in detail. I am a data geek, but I don't want to geek everybody out. I want to get onto the actions. So certainly, though, if anybody has any questions afterward, feel free to come to me. This slide shows total emissions from 2010 through 2018. The tan part at the bottom is San Miguel County, and the green at the top is Ouray County's component of our emissions. The dotted red line is our 20% goal that we're working to achieve. And so you'll see that as of 2018 data, San Miguel County's accomplishment was 6% out of that 20% that we're trying to reach. The total amount of emissions for 2018 in San Miguel County was equivalent to over 275 million pounds of coal burned. It's also equivalent to the amount of carbon that can be sequestered by almost 300,000 acres of U.S. forests in a year, just to put it in perspective of the emissions for our county. Now I take that greenhouse gas emissions total and break it down into categories. And in order to get the data, I actually receive a lot of information from a lot of people, many of them in this room right now. But we have broken down, and we have materials, food, and waste at 23%, transportation, which is vehicles and airplanes, at 24%, and then our electricity and natural gas, which is mostly associated with building energy use, that's over 50%. Looking at it a little differently, this is our pie chart. Same colors. Green is our materials, red transportation, and blue is our building utility use. Now I do want to point out that when we first started this, our regional government energy use was about 3% of this whole pie. Over the years since we started, that percentage has gone down to 1.2%. So the governments are leading the way. They're reducing their energy use, they're installing renewable energy, they're offsetting their energy and their emissions. The entire rest of that pie chart is us. So that's why it's so important for everybody here in the room and everybody in the community to become involved. It's because if we're going to reduce the size of this pie, everybody has to participate in their way. So, as a data geek and looking at this, we prioritize the blue, which is the building energy use. That's over 50%, and it's over 50% for every single community if we break it down by community. So we've prioritized that, and that's electricity and natural gas, and that data comes to me straight from the utility companies, so it's very accurate. And I analyze it further. So taking it back to that same type of chart, this is electricity and natural gas emissions over those years, and you'll see that we actually are reaching around our 20% goal if you look at the dotted line there, when you look at just our energy emissions. Those energy emissions are impacted by quite a few different variables. And I'm going to go into a few of those slides here. This is a population based on just Telluride and Mountain Village. The data comes from the census data as well as wastewater treatment plant numbers. And you can see that our census data is the blue chart on the bottom. About 3,900 people live in these two communities, and about 6,700 on average people that we have visitors per day. And that's average. We all know that the community goes up to 20,000 people, and then we have less than our census value of 4,000 at other times of the year. So it's a very widely varied number over the course of a year. That 6,700 is just an average number. I look at all these different factors to see how it's influencing our energy use. And again, I'm not going to geek out too much here. The next chart is just looking at how much heat is needed to heat our buildings. And so that depends, that's related to our temperature outside. The colder the winter, the more heat we need for our buildings. The more snowfall we have, the more we use natural gas, either for heating or for snow melt systems. This is data that was so graciously provided by Telski this year. So it doesn't include our outlying months when the ski area isn't tracking the data, but we think of our snowfall as seasonal. And so each one of these is a seasonal snowfall. And you'll see our super dry year, 17 and 18, and then our much, much snowier year the following winter. Well, when I'm looking at it for trying to analyze utility use, we look at it from a calendar basis. That's January through December. So I converted this data over to look at it on a calendar basis and then compare this again to how we're using our electricity and natural gas. So our emissions associated with electricity changes based on how much renewable energy we have. This is a chart that was that Mpa helped to develop using data from Tri-State. And you can see that our mix of renewable energy has changed from 13% in 2010 up to about 30%, and that was in 2016. And we know that number continues to grow by what Tri-State and us continue to bring online. We also look at total electricity use and how we're offsetting our use. That mix that we just looked at is the mixture in the brown bars here. And that total list, the rest of it is our offsets, our green blocks, things like that. Our total electricity use has actually stayed steady despite our growth across the region. So that shows us that our programs that are associated around reducing electricity use, offsetting, increasing our renewable energy actually is having impact. I'm not going to get into the rest of these slides. Again, I analyze things very far with everything. But all of this data and the tracking, it helps us track our progress, helps us understand where our emissions are coming from so that we can prioritize our actions. Other emissions beyond electricity are important. We are reaching our electricity-related goals, and we need to continue to work on the others as well. Colorado just adopted new state goals, and the Snuffles Energy Board and all the governments will be looking at those goals to adopt them this coming year. Those are to reduce emissions 26% by 2025, 50% by 2030, and 90% by 2050. The community of Telluride and others are also looking at adopting a target of carbon neutrality for as soon as we can reach it. So with that, I'm going to close this.
Nice.
Thank you, Ken. And so if you have questions you'd like to start jotting down, please do, and maybe raise your hand and we'll come pick up a card. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Go ahead. So, yeah, what's the question? What's the email? Yeah, this email list is to be kept aware and updated about this initiative, Education and Action Initiative. And we've got it mapped out through May. If there's interest, we'll be adding more events and action opportunities.
Anybody missed this? Anybody?
Okay, so thank you. And I don't know how many other communities actually have that depth of understanding and data about our situation that we do. I think we're another of the many, many ways that we're very fortunate here. So to bring in the rest of our panelists here, one question that we had is if you could share perhaps some more about the services that you offer, your organization offers the community and or its members to help manage, track, reduce the carbon footprint. Wiley, if you would, for San Miguel Power.
Would you mind if I give
Please.
a quick introduction about
Yes,
SMPA
I
on
would
a
like
on
you to.
a broad level?
Thank you, Stephen.
While I'm doing that, I'm going to put something up on the screen for you to look at. That kind of back in my biodiesel days, I'd be running around the alleys of Telluride picking up waste veg oil from the restaurants. Sometimes with permission, sometimes maybe not. But on the back of the Volkswagen Diesel Rabbit that I had was a sticker that said one solution comes up every morning. And it was a representation. How do I make this big?
Green dot.
Green. Okay. It was in reference to, of course, this technology right here. And at that time, if you would have said, Wiley, someday you're going to be working for a utility, I probably would have keeled over, dying of laughter at the very least. But there were some comments made here earlier that kind of help explain why I was able to make that transition from the biodiesel and being a solar pusher and being very anti-utility to actually working for a utility. And I'm curious if it was the change that has happened at SMPA, is that because of driven from inside SMPA? Or is it because maybe the structure of SMPA as a cooperative, which is owned by the members, it's got a democratically elected board of directors. We have one of your representative from the Telluride, Kevin Cooney, here, elected to serve on the board to govern the cooperative. We serve the members. We work for the members. It's like a lot of other co-ops, food co-ops, REI, really cool way, a cool model in the world today. So I'm curious, is it because of that model that and the changes, the community, the people in this room, the people that see, that want solutions, the people that are looking for some change, that are driving that through that model? My guess is absolutely, and that's actually one of the reasons why a lot of the work I do at SMPA is really important to me. So now I'll get to the question. We finance our operations by selling electricity. If we were a for-profit business, shareholders would get the benefit of making money selling electricity, but we're not that way. We're a not-for-profit. So when we sell electricity, what comes along with it is the idea is we want the people that use electricity and have to buy it to get the most out of it. How can they use the least amount to get the most value, most benefit to their life? How can they have the minimal impact using electricity to get value that that electricity provides? So that means renewable energy is an important piece. Energy conservation is an important piece. Conservation is using less electricity, less energy. And then energy efficiency is an important piece, which is using technologies such as LED lighting, more efficient appliances, anything like that, to use less electricity but still get the same amount of work accomplished. So at SMPA, we've got a lot of different programs that have been around for quite a while. Rebates, so we offer cash rebates for renewable energy like rooftop solar, even micro hydro or small wind. We will do rebates for energy efficient appliances, lighting, electric vehicles. If people have ideas and it seems like new technologies are coming along, and we adapt and we will make our rebate program incorporate those new technologies. It's one of the funny things that we're seeing. It is battery-powered appliances, battery-powered lawnmowers, chainsaws, and stuff like that. So we're actually going to be able to have rebates for some of those types of things. When it comes to renewable energy, maybe beyond what people are doing on their rooftop and self-generating, we have some bigger programs that are looking to green the overall electricity supply, the default mix that are delivered to our homes and businesses and schools. And one of the ways that that is accomplished is through our Totally Green program. Anybody in here subscribing to our Totally Green program at this point? So,
Yeah, I don't buy any electricity from the power company.
So you're doing it.
so yes, you're totally green.
Without buying it from some other place.
So we look for simple ways and for people to get a channel to where they can support this whole movement, and it's multifaceted. There's no one single easy way to take a system that's been built on fossil fuels and convert it over to something that's entirely renewable. So totally green is one step, self-generation is another step, and the energy conservation and efficiency is what we like to think of as the intermediate step. So totally green one, conservation, energy efficiency, and then self-generation is kind of our program. I have some materials on the back table that will help explain some of those, and of course we've got our phone lines and our website and all that, so we love questions about this topic and to share what we're doing. And when we have those conversations, we learn. The staff learns, and I think we do a fairly good job. I think I do a good job too, of listening to what the needs of the membership are, and then going back and finding ways to make programs and solutions that address those needs. And here we talk a lot about climate goals, and I like to think SMPA is not necessarily setting those goals, but listening to what those goals are of our community and then responding. So I'll say one more thing, and I just wanted to point out Terry Schuyler here, my colleague, is one of those on the team that does the listening and does the work. So thank you all for being here, and thanks for inviting me to be on this.
Thank you so much. That was like an above and beyond response, thank you. I appreciate that. And David, could you share some about our smart?
Nobody knows about SMART already?
Maybe.
I know some people do.
Yeah, I know, I'm just kidding. So we do a lot. We're one of your regional transit providers, because I consider the gondola to be regional public transportation as well. We are not just a transit agency, though. We also push for bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We're actually excited to do a project this year for a study and design for an underpass of the Highway 145 at the Meadows Trail crossing down in there. So we're not just buses, but that's the big chunk of what we do. It's where most of our budget goes. We are operating now, just celebrated our first year of operating the Norwood and Down Valley routes. We assumed responsibility for the Lawson Hill route back in November. We've been underwriting the Mountain Village Commuter Shuttle program for the last couple years, so it doesn't have our logo on it, but we're putting gas in the tank for them. Things like that. The RICO service, which I hope you all know, which is actually my highlight. The good news to share is that the little town of RICO voted to join SMART back in November, so they're our newest jurisdictional member, and that project's been going really well. So it's kind of all across the board, and we are excited to kick off a conversation this year. Grant funding is secure for doing Telluride Regional Bike Share, hopefully with implementation in 2021. So I mentioned all that stuff just to remind you, it's not just the awesome looking green and yellow buses. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on. So.
What about electrification, if you could? What's the thought
Yeah.
there, or where are we at with, I know it's.
Yeah, that's another exciting project for this year as well. So with the support of our good friends at the Colorado Department of Transportation, we got a planning grant to do an electric bus feasibility study and implementation timeline this year.
Awesome.
So I have a ton of details. I brought the scope of work actually of the project. It's kind of an engineering technical study, to be honest. And one of the things we want to do is make sure that the current electric bus technology that's out there today works for what we're doing today, right? We're a really small agency. I can't afford to go out and buy twice as many buses as I might need because they don't have the same range as our trusty old diesels, unfortunately. But I'm super confident that the electric technology is coming along to a point where we will probably make a business decision to do it because you save money on maintenance. If we can work out a deal with our friends at SMPA, maybe we get a little cheaper fuel costs, things like that. And we'll obviously pass that on to our customers. But I'm super enthused. I think that we'll get there. I don't want to go into a study having a predetermined outcome.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a hard engineering look at it, model our routes, look at what's available out there right now. Big part of this also is the charging infrastructure. Believe it or not, electric buses don't work like a Tesla. Not anybody can just plug them in. We're dealing with way more voltage, super dangerous situations, a lot of training, secure facilities, all that kind of stuff has to come along with what we're talking about, 1,000 kilowatt hour batteries, things like that. And I'd really like to go into it and come out of it with an idea of second market use for the batteries, because we know that the batteries aren't going to last as long as the vehicle. We want to figure out what are we going to do with those things, because they're kind of big and nasty, if we're being honest about it. There's a lot of funky chemicals and metals and things in those things, so we'd love to have a game plan about disposal, reusing them, that whole second thing. And this is a conversation that's evolving nationwide and in the state of Colorado, not on just the batteries, but the buses in general.
Yeah.
The governor has set forth the goal to have 1,000 electric buses on the road in Colorado by 2025. By my last count, across RTD, our friends in the Roaring Fork Transportation Authority over in Aspen, a few other smaller transit agencies, by my count, off the cuff, I think we're at about 30 electric buses, maybe 50 if you throw in the 16th Street Mall buses that are in Denver. We've got a long way to go, but I think it's a great goal. If you don't have a goal, you got nothing to shoot for. So we're on board with that, and I'm optimistic about how that looks for SMART in the future.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kim, if you would briefly share about the Eco Action programs available to the public, I know
Yes.
you spoke a lot about earlier, but didn't you?
So Eco Action Partners, in addition to tracking a lot of data, we create programs to engage every aspect of the community. So we work with the governments, as you saw. We also have we have our Truth or Dare program for students, and we offer that across the region for middle school age students to engage them in taking actions. And it's fun to learn. The students, they take those actions to heart and they pass them on to their peers, and then they'll take them home to their parents, and so they're actually spreading the education beyond the number of students that take the challenge, and they're competing with each other for the maximum number of points over the time period that they're doing it. So that's our student program. I'm going to introduce Tyler Simmons back there. He's our zero waste coordinator. He is very active at all the festivals, Sunset Concert Series up in Mountain Village, helping reduce waste overall, managing volunteers at the compost recycling trash, CRT stations that you'll see. And we're just active in helping reduce all of that. We have a plastic film recycling program going on now. We collect all those plastic bags and whatnot that you might have, so we're collecting that and we're taking them down to Montrose, and they get turned by Trex into decking. So it's an awesome recycling, reuse opportunity, and we're going to have collection stations across the region. I'm going to ask Jake Neese, who's our other staff member, to speak on his 4 programs that he's managing now. Then I can sit down.
So I do the low income weatherization. So that is a program put on by San Miguel Power where we go do energy audits, and then we actually have funds from San Miguel Power and Black Hills to make those improvements. So we're putting in attic insulation, replacing old furnaces, changing all the LED bulbs, sometimes spending over $10,000 on a house. And so that really makes a big quality of life difference for people who wouldn't otherwise have the money to spend, and then it also directly reduces the greenhouse gases emitted from leaky houses. One of the other ones is the Green Lights program. So Tri-State did bring back funding for that. They originally nixed it for 2020, but it's back. So we're going to have light bulbs for 75% off this spring again that any SMPA member can purchase. And so that comes from Tri-State, SMPA, and the local municipalities participating. We've also got the Green Business Program, which is a consultation with businesses where I'll do a walkthrough, and I've got a list of actions and rebates and incentives where I can take a look at their building, see what's realistic depending on whether they own it or not, what the space is like, what the lease agreement is like, and help them reduce the greenhouse gas impacts of their business, and also just reduce utility bills and connect them with the ever-changing federal, state, local rebate landscape that changes year to year. Those incentives are out there, but they're hard to take advantage of. So I keep track of that and help people connect with that. And also, what's my 4th one?
SMPA rebate program.
The SMPA rebate program, which is a new one. We're working with SMPA to revamp their rebate program this year to incentivize some more beneficial electrification, and also develop a contractor trade ally program that will help bring contractors with us with this new technology. Heat pumps are the best examples of this. It's a new technology. They're really great. They can be used for heating and air conditioning, but not a lot of contractors know how to install them yet. And so we are trying to build this whole system to drag our whole infrastructure into the future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. So next question is, we're doing a lot in this community already, right? What more could we be doing that could really help us accelerate our progress here? Jeff, what are some thoughts?
Well, we learned a lot when we started by monitoring our size of our carbon footprint. So the first thing you have to do is figure out, as we've seen now with everyone, what our carbon footprint looks like. And for us, we went through all the different areas where there's greenhouse gas emissions, and electricity was our biggest one. And so if you can target your big inputs as far as your carbon footprint, then you can try to start figuring out ways to reduce it. We were able to, in our first, I think our second year of monitoring, Wiley and I were talking about it when we met each other tonight, we reduced our electrical consumption in for the ski area by 44% our first year. By changing our snowmaking technology. We invested a lot of money in capital. And a lot of times that's what it takes. You have to find out what technologies are out there, what new things are out there to be more efficient. I think that word efficient has come up a lot tonight. And efficiency is really the key, to not be wasteful and to find more efficient ways to use energy to reduce your carbon footprint. So I think that's a big start for everyone, is to think of how to be more efficient. I think that, what we've learned, ski area, because weather is a big part of our operation, our footprint is variable. It'll go up and down depending on the type of year we had. And you saw the snow conditions that Kim showed. And 2 years ago we had a really low year, and last year we had a really big year. And I think that those kinds of things have taught us how to be more nimble and more efficient to be able to operate under more varied conditions. And so for us, the big picture is to kind of first quantify where is our main consumptive uses coming from, how do we reduce those, and then how do we go from there. So that year that we reduced 44%, our carbon footprint went down by 12%, but we've had variable, kind of inputs since then. So now, our goal is to reduce from the 2011 levels to 2025 by 25%. And being at 12 to 13% right now, we've got a ways to go. So we're trying to really accelerate by including everyone. One of the things we've done this year, when we had our orientation for the beginning of the season, is that we've asked everyone that works for us to be kind of a sustainability coordinator within their department and come to us with ideas on how to reduce our carbon footprint, reduce waste. We've got a long ways to go with reducing waste as well. And so I think getting more people involved and getting buy-in from everyone starts to build a culture where everyone starts to take it home with them and start to reduce their footprint in other ways because they're thinking about it more often. Composting, when you learn about composting, there are easy ways to compost at home, and there's ways now to compost in bigger ways with our operations, with our restaurants and so on. So, I think that being efficient and really looking at new technology are two key things that we're really looking at to reduce carbon footprint. So
That's awesome.
that's what I'll give you on that.
Thank you. Megan, what do you think? What more could we be doing, or is the Forest Service looking at doing?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll stay on.
Yeah,
This is my
please.
third meeting today. And I didn't get enough coffee. For those of you who don't know me, I've only been here for 2 months, right? And so my knowledge of the region, other than I really love to play here for many years, is low. But I can definitely speak to some of the things that the agency is doing and some of my hopes potentially for moving forward here, because I hope to be here for quite some time. But as many of you know, the mission of the agency is to manage some of our most treasured landscapes, the landscapes that provide us with the clean air and water and timber and renewable and sometimes non-renewable resources that we depend on. In addition to having these places that, like I just mentioned, love to play, the things that reset our souls and really connect us to this awesome planet that we're on. So I feel very lucky to work for this agency with such an incredible mission. If any of you remembered from history, maybe your history class, the Organic Act that even preceded our agency was really focused on timber reserves and water. But as time has progressed, so is the agency mission to include things like managing for rangeland resources, managing for wildlife, managing for recreation opportunities. But something that we're just diving into now, which is why you're probably going to see more Forest Service folks at missions like this, is partnerships, collaboration, and sustainability, recognizing that these are the things that we're going to need if we're going to survive in the future, both as an agency and then probably as a species, right? Not to be Tim and Glenn. But some things that, some of the reasons why I wanted to move here and work for this particular forest, not just because it's one of the best places to play in the world if I had to make a list, is because they're doing some really unique and different things. Some of you may be familiar with the speed mirror projects. Let's hope I get this right. Shout out the answer if I don't. Spruce beetle epidemic, aspen decline management response. And what that sums up is a very, very large scale, at least for our forest, 120,000 acres worth of project area within the larger 3 million that we manage, focused on doing these large scale environmental analyses so that we can meet a couple of objectives. One of those is to commit to a program of work that's going to give us 20 years worth of action so that we're not just focused on one little widget at a time. The other thing that was neat about this project is it brought in a lot of players, not just from the community, but from the academic community, right? So it wasn't just our local resources or the timber mill or potentially the permittees that are using it for range. We brought the scientists to the table at the same time. So something that I observed today at our public speed mirror meeting was CSU and all these other academic resources telling us what they were learning from these projects that we're doing now, how we should use that information for designing the next tier of projects. And it seems like that's something that the Forest Service would always be doing, but for many decades the research arm was sort of a separate thing. And something that's really cool, I think now and for the future, is that we're bringing that closer to us and looking at the immediate impacts of the decisions we're making and trying to better inform even the thing we're doing the next day, not even 20 and 30 years down the road. Gosh, I lost my train of thought. But I guess maybe just to recap before I sit down, and I know there will be other questions for us, is I think one of the reasons that you're going to see more Forest Service folks at meetings just like this one is because they're coming from a different generation, right? When I was in grad school, one of the classes, we read every single page of the International Panel on Climate Change report, which is thousands and thousands of pages. And so you can't wade through something like that without having it leave an impact on you and every decision you make moving forward. So I think it's a neat time to be working together, and it's an awesome time to be in this community that already has all of these thriving partnerships focused on the future. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Adam, also to ask you that question, what more do you think we could be doing here that would really accelerate our progress?
Well, I'll recruit Sarah on this as well. Many of you may know, but some of you may not know that we put together a program to generate offsets and sell offsets with the community, and we did that under a grant from Telluride Foundation, and we've worked with the town. We wanted to reduce the carbon footprint of the town. That slide on the carbon footprint being 33 metric tons per annum is an old slide. We put that up in 2016 as well. One thing about the Galloping Goose is through that partnership, we've offset the Galloping Goose's carbon footprint for 2017 at 300 metric tons, and we've got certificates for these. So, I mean, this is just a copy of the certificate, but the Galloping Goose is completely carbon neutral for 2016, 2017, and 2018. So what we did is we bought carbon offsets or worked with a carbon offset program to make the goose a net carbon neutral. So the goose still has a tailpipe and it still has emissions, but then we worked with somebody who could capture the photosynthetic activity to draw down the emissions, and so the net of the goose is zero through this investment. We've worked with the community's invested in this. 2017 Mountain Film did the same, Telluride Bluegrass. I mean, we have a bunch of folks here. We think at Pinhead that, and I think everybody on the panel agrees, quantification is critically important. Now we're armed with the data. We know how much of our carbon footprint is. We know how big our shoe size is. Now we got to shrink it. And our actions, I guess, collectively are not happening fast enough.
Yeah.
I'll kind of, but there are actions.
Yeah.
And you look at the big kind of rocks that we want to put in and then we can put sand on the sides. The big rocks are energy and electricity. And you guys, Wiley, you guys are working on reducing the carbon footprint of electricity that comes into our community, both through your green programs and then Tri-State is starting to get the grip that, hey, we can reduce our carbon footprint and maybe even have less expensive electricity. So it's a win-win there. Jeff, you guys are, kind of leaning in on reducing the emissions, but I guess what I saw from Kim's slides is we're not doing it fast enough because we're not going to hit our targets.
Yeah.
So we need to do some, sharpening of our pencils and really put together that reduction strategy that we hold ourselves accountable to, and maybe some of the leadership in the room can help lead that effort to hold us accountable to it and make those commitments.
Is that offset program, Adam, available to the public?
Sure, you can buy it on the Pinhead Climate Institute website.
Yeah, and it's so popular that Aspen's airport has gone out and bought carbon offsets from our program.
Yeah.
So that's an endorsement, I guess, from the folks over the hill in Aspen. We haven't quite gotten as far in San Miguel County on the airport effort, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Chris, any thoughts what more we could be doing?
Oh, yeah, I was going to run down a few things that the county has done since I'm wearing my county hat tonight. One, we do have a goal, a stated goal of, as an organization, the county organization, to be carbon neutral as soon as possible. Granted, that's pretty vague, but we have 4-year terms, and we can't bind future commissions. But we're really working pretty aggressively on that. Looking at and you saw the reduction in the slice of the pie for the government, so we have been trying to work on that. So I'm happy to say we just achieved the gold designation with SoulSmart. Hillary will be getting the award tomorrow at the National Counties meeting. It's a national designation program recognizing cities, counties, and regional organizations that foster development of mature local solar markets. So that's part of it. We are totally green. I told them I don't really like that term because our electricity, we're going through the Totally Green program with Mpa and offsetting all the electricity for the county. It's not the end all, it's a step. We have a Watts Up initiative. Again, it's trying to streamline the county's permitting process and highlight available technical resources for anybody looking to install solar locally in the county. We will find out in about a month on a DOLA, Division of Local Affairs grant, which would fund solar PV projects in Norwood at our new Sheriff's Annex building and some land we have next to it. It would be a carport type, and that project would provide 51% of our county electricity through renewable energy. It's a strong collaboration with San Miguel Power Association. We're looking at some battery technologies and ways to kind of not get around, but sort of adapt and evolve some of the policies that are slightly restrictive coming from Tri-State and.
I'm sorry, when the 51% is just the county governments?
Yes,
It's not the
yes.
people who live in
Again,
the
this is
county.
just for the organization because, that's a bigger nut that
Yeah.
we'd like to work on. And I think somebody mentioned the savings. So the county, if we get this grant, we'll be putting in $750,000 from the county. We'll match that from DOLA. But the savings over 25 years on the panels will be 2.3 million at today's electrical rates, and about 7,700 tons of greenhouse gases saved. So that's good. The new Sheriff Annex is going to be a Green Globes building, another designation, and it's going to have EV fast chargers there. We're looking to improve our fleet every time we can, and part of that is the charging infrastructure. Some of that's grant dependent. We're going to be doing, as the county, an investment grade audit to, again, go after those really detailed energy efficiency measures. One of the interesting things, so we upgraded the courthouse, which is challenging in town because it's a historic building, and so we couldn't alter the outside. So had some creative people look at particularly the windows and upgrading the windows from the inside. So the exterior look isn't changed, but the efficiency has gone way up, which is great. Little park and ride thing. We've got solar panels on the bathrooms there. We've got some charging stations there. We did the provided land and collaboration for the 200 kilowatt solar farm for the Solar IQ program. That's the income qualified out at the Norwood Transfer Station. Work with SMART, have funded Eco Action. We do the electronic recycling in the region. County Health, we're doing the hazardous waste and e-cycle collection. So in 2009, so that was before my time on the commission, we had adopted a resolution supporting a 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 and a 20% reduction by this year, and those are from 2009 levels. We're also a member of Cool Counties and CC4CA, Colorado Communities for Climate Action, Recycle Colorado, trying to continue to work on the composting nut. But I think one of the things, again, what we really want to know from the audience is, what do you think is missing from the government, from our organizations, from our community that you would like to see happen or participate in? Because that's really important. Is like, we've at the government, I feel like we have a pretty good plan. We've got longer term plans. Some of the organizations do, with the pinhead offsets. But what's missing in the community to really take us up another couple of levels, not just one level, because this is a crisis and emergency. And we use that term in a lot of our comments letter for public lands, et cetera. We're in a climate emergency, and if we don't really figure out some major actions, and we're gonna get inundated with it. So again, I kind of that question: what more can we do? Yeah.
And by the way, we are filming this because many people could not come in person, so we want to offer it. So you might get responses too. But does anyone have any thoughts on this? What more could we do?
I think this is for Megan. Is there anybody evaluating the climate change impacts of the beetle infestation of the spruce tree?
That was a question that came up in our working group, and I think it's one of many things that, I guess it depends on what you mean by climate change, but in terms of trying to document the impacts of that, both for carbon storage and other things, absolutely yes. And one of the things that I just pulled up and thought, I should have shared this earlier, so thanks for the segue, is that clearly forests play a very critical role in storing carbon, so trying to combat some of these greenhouse gas emissions. And what I thought was really fascinating, one is that about 16% of our national greenhouse gas emissions can be stored on the forest, and so that's clearly a role that we play. And even on the Little Norwood Ranger District, we're 400,000 acres, and I think you said Telluride would need 300,000 acres if we were going to store all of that. So I almost got you covered. But one of the things that I think is most fascinating about this report, and I've got a handout I'll send so folks can have access to these, is the agency is a leader in developing carbon assessments and tools to learn how to, one, identify it, and then what do we do with that information. So we've got a great report here for the Rocky Mountain region that's only from 2015. And I think one of the most interesting things is that the line, in terms of how much we're able to store, is relatively flat over the 10-year period that they were doing this study, which kind of goes to show us that some of the management activities that we're undertaking that people have concerns around aren't causing big fluctuations, which I just learned, so that's all the knowledge I have to share.
So Madeline, I was going to say too, right now, I think our local folks are great, but right now at the federal level, there's proposals to change NEPA, which is the process that we use to evaluate a lot of environmental issues. And one of the things that they want to take out of NEPA is any ability to consider cumulative effects and sort of long-range effects that we can't deal with. So if you're politically inclined at all, check out the NEPA changes and maybe consider putting a letter in. It takes out, it really kind of knocks the feet out of local government from our ability to slow things down a little bit and make sure the science is good and make sure the agencies are following their rules and their mandates. So that's something that we just did a comment letter on, and the changes are sweeping. And yes, there are some changes that could happen to NEPA because it is onerous and it takes a lot of time. But to gut it like is being proposed is going to really hurt our environment for a long time.
To piggyback on that, never hesitate to write a letter to your local district or Forest Service and ask them what they're doing about climate or measuring impacts right in the NEPA process. So even if the rule changed, you still have that right. I encourage you to use it.
Chris, just to responding to your question, you haven't talked about it, but I just wondered if you guys were looking at the impacts of construction, our construction economy. I know I see tons of subs coming from very far away, driving in single, large trucks every day. And then, just looking at the size of the houses, and they're building through the winter, and they're blowing, gas.
While they're working, yeah.
I'm just wondering if you guys are looking at that, and also just house size and second homeowners who are running their properties, 24/7. Is there anything along those lines?
So, and Kim might address this too, but each of the governments, we have our building codes. We were sort of ahead of the game for a little while, now we're behind the game in a few places. So I know at the county, we've been trying to do this for 2 years, but we had building official turnover. So we want to up the grade of the building code that we have. We had some pretty strong energy codes in there, but they need work. Many years ago, we did get a house size limitation at the county, but it's 12,000 square feet. So if anything over 12,000 square feet means you have to come in for a special use permit. It's not even a complete restriction. It's just you have to come in. You would have thought we were ripping people's babies from their arms or something, because it was not well received in the community at that time. But we do have that limitation in there, so we're not going to have a 16,000 square foot house in the county. Each of the other governments is different. And I think how we get goods and services in this community is a big part of our footprint. So the local food movement, which we're part of, and the raw water, that's important. But I think the thing that you guys were talking about with the trades and kind of having more of the most efficient technologies come in is important. It's really challenging and maybe not a good idea at the government level to try and do too much tinkering with the system, in my mind, other than looking at the rules and regs that have to be built too. So, and I don't know if some people may not know, the far west end of our county, we don't even have building permits. They're very independent, and they know what they're doing. But here on the east end, there's so much more turnover, and we have to be really careful about safety and public health and welfare. So it's kind of a broad answer. So yes, we at the county will be looking to update our building codes. The other part of that we have to be aware of is, Wrights Mesa area, we can't make, or it'd be very challenging to make building costs so high that we have a negative effect on our need for affordable housing and the ability for people to build. So that's one of the things that we have to balance, is I think we commissioners all want tighter envelopes and more efficient buildings. We want to do all the things that make the most sense, but we do have to be sensitive to that cost factor, and not move more people that are struggling to live here out of the area because they can't afford to build a home.
So one of the other things that I do with Eco Action Partners is I work with the building departments on the energy codes, and we've been working with all the jurisdictions for a number of years toward updating. I would say most of the things that you mentioned are not encapsulated or covered in any of the codes, where construction people come from or any of that. So it definitely is part of our carbon footprint that it cannot be addressed by building codes, but it's definitely something to be considered. I do have to put a big, huge yay out to the town of Telluride. They just 2 weeks ago adopted the 2018 code system, which includes the international energy codes. So new construction here in Telluride will be 10% more efficient than it was required to be before. So, and that's the same code system that the county and Mountain Village and the other jurisdictions in the region are heading toward adopting. So we're heading in the right direction on that. Yeah, building official turnover has definitely been a challenge, though. So.
Awesome, thank you. Lee?
Also to your question, at the county level, the County Planning Commission is beginning this year what's going to be a multi-year effort to redo and update the master plans of the various regions. So the Telluride master plan will be revised and reviewed. Wrights Mesa we'll probably take another look at. We're talking about a Down Valley master plan for Placerville. And sustainability is very much on our minds as being a category of consideration that we will look at pretty hard.
What's the state of recycling and composting for community members at this point?
I can give you an update since I've been trying to get it going for 33 years. So through Eco Action, so a couple years ago they got a grant, and I actually got hired to do the survey. I surveyed all the composting facilities on the western slope because that's something the communities have said over and over again that they want. And so I looked at almost every single one of them is county-owned landfill, which makes things easier. So anyway, that's not exactly an option for us. In the meantime, CDPHE, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, has a couple of tiers of grants, and I think OFER, along with Eco Action, applied for one of the smaller grants and got 2 earth cubes. So they're in-vessel systems. They have a trash facility, so it's indoors. And these do have an electric, they're electrical, they have a heater system in them.
Yep, they're plugged in so that they don't get too cold and don't freeze.
These are OFER resident.
Yep.
But that was incredibly popular with OFER residents, and in fact, then, was it last year or 2 years ago, they got 2 more. So they have 4 of those. And one of the things that came out of the study that I did was there needs to be a large regional, there needs to be, in particularly in rural areas, I think there's the opportunity for neighborhood size is important. We have some challenges in our weather and most particularly our bear issue. We do have a young guy in town now who's taken on individual compost pickup. So Mark Sturdivant, and I can give you his contact. He has started picking up, I was doing it and I couldn't do it anymore, buckets from individual homeowners and a couple of restaurants, and then is bringing that actually to my farm for composting. So over the years, the state rules have improved in terms of small scale composting. There's a great organization, Durango, that's doing, it's kind of fork to farm, sort of backwards, or table to farm. And we're trying to copy the things that are working in the rural areas. And then larger scale, because we started the composting with the festivals, which includes the compostable plastics, which are kind of a nightmare. But the larger scale, another grant that finally came to our region is the facility should be opening soon, if they haven't already. They're taking some of it. Oh, yeah. Is the Motts brothers, and they're developing I think it's a class 3 compost facility right on the Montrose border, or Montrose County border. So they're going to be taking all the festival compost waste. They're working on a plan for food waste. So they're kind of our larger scale answer right now. But if anybody who wants to talk more about specifically composting, we've talked about different neighborhoods, different technologies, from large scale in-vessel to windrow. It's just, and we actually have a rural group in Recycle Colorado, and we have challenges, and yet we feel like that's one of our biggest places of opportunity for a for-profit business that I think could be stable and growing. So Mark has, thank you, Mark has started that this winter, and I think he's going to grow, and we just need more of that. More of that to happen.
Related audience question, it's been very patient, thank you, is to learn more about what Telsky is doing for composting.
Okay. So that's a good question. I actually brought a proposal that we're putting together for on-mountain composting. What we would like to do is we need to look at our various on-mountain restaurants, and Tyler's in the room here. He knows one of them really well. And it's not just providing the equipment. We're looking at this Green Mountain Technologies. It's an intermodal earth flow that would be a large-scale composter that we'd have down by our shop, because we can use the material for for revegetation and those kinds of things. We wouldn't have enough if we did it. But so anyway, we're looking for the space. We're looking at the capital cost, and we're also the big thing that we need to do is really kind of figure out how to have sorting stations at the restaurant and simplify the waste products that are at the restaurant. So there's a lot to it to get to the point to where you're composting, you're recycling correctly and that kind of thing. And we've got work to do on that. We're gonna use guano as that's the main, I think, problem we have right now. There's a lot, as you know, there's a movement in town of Mountain Village, town of Telluride to eliminate single-use plastics. And so on that note, you've got to come up with ways to deal with that. You've got to come up with better ways to deal with your food waste. And you know, composting is kind of a no-brainer. And we just need to find the space for it and make sure we get the right machine or whatever you want to call it. And we can talk to some of the people here that might have experience with these
We
things.
actually have one waiting, sitting out at the county transfer station.
Is it a good size? Is it a good size?
the earth bin.
Yeah. Well, it'd be good to look at.
We should talk.
Work on that.
We might be able to make a deal. Anyway, so, yeah, we're excited about that. This is, as I mentioned, we started this new thing this year. We call it Snowball Effect, where we're trying to get our employees more involved. There's a lot of people, like you were saying, that are younger working with us now that have gone through school, and this is, you know, their specialty is really focused on the things that we need to work harder on. So this came from our lift operations dispatcher. She did it, you know, while she's up there. You know, hopefully she's not too busy all day long, and she was able to put together a proposal. And we've since worked with her to kind of turn it into a reality at our shop area.
That's awesome.
So anyway, we're working on it. We hope to be able to install something this summer. Would be nice.
Very cool.
Hey, while we still have some time left, can I just throw this out to all of you? I run the Pinhead Institute as well as we work together in Pinhead Climate Institute, and we're a Smithsonian affiliate. So March 14th, we're gonna have a group of a bunch of teenagers, at least 30 of them here, to try to bite off a local climate solution issue, you know, right? So they need to come up with something they can do in the room here, starting March 14th, and then going forward through the summer, and then they get to come to DC and present it. I'll drive them in my Tesla to be very green. But my point is, if any of you guys who are working in this space have an idea of something that teenagers can do, I know it's gotta be bigger than that, it's gotta be institutional, and it's gotta be all of us, and it can't be just on the individual, but we do have a group of highly motivated individual teenagers who are gonna be working on something, and I know we're in the room for the next half hour, so I just figured I'd throw that out there now, and then maybe if you have ideas, you could come see me afterwards, and you guys as well, because we could take ideas from anybody. I mean, maybe it could be composting, or, I don't know, helping your skiers know one thing or another. I have no idea what it is, but maybe we can come up with something together.
And that was a big part of launching this whole
Yeah.
Education Action Series,
Yeah.
Sarah, so thank you. It's really to help us get started. We thought, let's share where we're at, let's share all this awesome information, right? But the exciting aspect becomes, how do we work together?
Yeah,
How do
and Patrick,
collaborations
raise your
happen?
hand, he's running our Earth
Great.
Optimism Summit for Pinhead with the Smithsonian that starts on the 14th here. And we'll have pie from 4 to 5 on the 14th, because it's Pie Day. So, right here, come back here.
So I think one of the things that might be is the school reducing foods, because we've talked about that, and we have the Earth Guardians working on that, and I think that would be great. And then I love that term, Earth Optimist, and I think that's one of the things that's kind of my banner cry right now, is we have, in my estimation, a lack of imagination about what the future could be or should be when we move off of fossil fuels. And so that's kind of been my challenge throwing out at the meetings I'm at, is use your imagination, use the kids' imaginations, use ours. What could it be? What would it look like? What would it look like for transportation? What would it look like for our food production? You know, where would our energy sources come from? Because I think the more we imagine that, collectively and individually, the more we will head that direction. And I think that's really lacking. I gave Madeline a book last week that I ordered. It's called From What Is to What If. And I think we spend far too little time on what if. Part of it's because we're in a bit of we are in emergency. We're a bit of a war right now on some of the actions that we need to take. But I kind of go back to that. We need that Earth optimism. We need ideas from all age groups on what it is that we could create.
That can be what pulls us forward together, right? And another question I had too while we're all here, what groups are missing here? And how do we get them to be more of a part of this?
BLM missing?
BLM, would you say? Is
Agriculture.
Agriculture.
Farm.
Farms, cattle ranchers. CNN is coming out to film the sustainable yak industry. And I'm the guest chef to be the honor to present that to Kendra's Kitchen.
Do you need to practice?
And so I want to have yak burgers. It's an alternative to beef. It's for the cattle ranching of the 21st century. So I'm honored to be selected as yak chef. And I
How
have
about
my
mineral
real quick,
extraction? How come we don't have that side?
One of our county
What's that?
programs.
Mineral extraction, you know, we've
Yeah.
got all these crossing the lines and working with other entities. Why aren't they involved? There's a great resource for money we've gotten in the past.
Yeah. And then the corollary is how can we get them involved, right? Who is it? I guess because part of what we're coming out of this hopefully with is each of us asking ourselves, right? What more could I be doing? What more could we be doing? And maybe part of that could be, could we be bridging to someone who's not here in this room? So if we do this again in the fall, then maybe this can actually be more representative, right, of our region. And that it really is up to all of us, though, to be bridging out. It's a very divided feeling time, and it does take a little bit of like believing it's possible, like Chris is saying, but it is possible. And if next time we got together, if we brought someone from that extractive industry, someone from Idorado, and bring them into this conversation, I personally think that's what could most accelerate us.
We need to share the successes and failures, because nobody likes to mention their failures. So it's, yeah, so it's just forgotten, but they want to always boast about their successes. Well, you share your failures too, and that way somebody doesn't make the same mistake. And that's where a mining extraction entity could come in and offer some technology that's out there that you're not aware of.
Yeah,
Yeah. I was taken by lots of the data that was presented, and obviously, I'm sure everybody in the room has lots of questions about, well, where did that number come from? Well, one piece of data that I was struck by is that 25% of the footprint is residential. And it seems to me the people who are not in the room, metaphorically, are the people who live in the houses and the condos, who, at least if they're like me, know that they can change light bulbs and they can turn down their thermostat, you know, the sort of obvious things, but what they don't know is what they don't know. What could be done to displace, for example, the fossil fuel component of the power that they generate, the load that they create?
yeah.
Man, I'm all over that. I'm an energy inventor. I showed my system to government people for years ago. It's 10 years old. But because I don't use computers and phones, I've had absolutely no networking is done. I brought it here into this room and showed it at the science fair.
Science last
And
year.
nobody
Yeah.
even knows,
I hear you
man.
though, the question around.
What I'm suggesting is that some of the governmental organizations might make a better effort to get out to the people who actually live in the houses, or at least for a couple of weeks of the year live in the houses, and, you know, say what can be done by them individually. 'Cause,
Yeah.
you know, I really think there's a lot more that people could do.
Yeah, let me mention in the room, I just got solar on my roof, and everybody had told me, oh my God, it's so impossible, we can't get permits, and it was so easy, the town made it so easy. I'll just mention that, in case anybody's thinking about it.
It took
was-
36 years
Yeah,
for that.
I know, it used to be really difficult, but I'm just saying it's
Alright.
not anymore, so.
They're not a historical building.
Can we also consider including like CEPHE, public health should be here? They should be active. We're looking at the health of the planet, but it impacts all of us. How much plastic we're getting in our water, in our food, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And they should be here, and we need to get them involved.
Yeah, Delaney?
I wanted to answer that question as an elected official, and this goes for Chris too. The county and the town are members of a group called Club 20, which is representative of the 20 counties on the western slope, which are rural. They may have cities like Grand Junction, but the bulk of the area in the western slope is rural. And that does bridge those gaps with every facet of life in Colorado: mining, oil and gas exploration, ranching, agriculture, and health concerns come in across the board. So what I would say as a way to help bridge that gap is, as these meetings go forward, potentially have one out in the west end of the county, because then it's easier for people who are in those industries to come to the meetings and also have interaction. I know I learned so much going to the Club 20 meeting in Denver in late January, and sitting at the table with people who are from every walk of life in the state, and we all in the end have the same concerns. keeping in mind that there are still people who legitimately, in their mind, are still, they don't believe that there is a problem with climate change or climate crisis. But being able to go in with an open mind and talk to people and put yourself in their shoes so that a productive, collaborative discussion can be had.
I'd like to expand on that a little because I've been going for the last 4 years. And what I found was similar to what Delaney does, is that we actually agree probably 70, 80, even 90% of the time on issues. The most challenging ones are water, energy. Energy's the big one because it's been a very oil and gas centric organization for a long time. So it's really great to have Telluride have just joined, because we need more voices bringing the other side of the equation to that discussion. And if you're interested, it's a very interesting organization. We have a lot of subcommittees, and the subcommittees meet twice a year, today and tomorrow. So I'm gonna listen in on the one tomorrow. There's a water subcommittee, there's a broadband subcommittee, and then in 2 weeks there'll be energy, public lands. We're going to be talking about the wolf reintroduction. It's a very interesting organization. But again, it's like 80% of the things we agree on. We want to be happy. We want to be healthy. We want a clean environment. There are some major differences when it comes to the energy group, so that's where we need the most
What
work.
about, Kim, as far as the data and how you got it organized in that great pie chart, are there sectors that you think maybe we should be reaching out more, we could be bridging out more collectively here and inviting to this?
Well, I guess I had in my mind first just to how to getting the word out there to homeowners, businesses, whatnot. Working for an organization for as long as I have that has all these programs, and we're constantly trying to get the word out. What we've found through one of our programs that has just taken off is that word of mouth from one neighbor to the next is the best method of communication. You know, regardless of how much we might put in the paper or talk to the press or, you know, communicate or present, it really does come down to who do you know and making it part of the normal conversation. Our income qualified program, you know, really didn't max out on how many homes that we could treat during the first year. We're 3 years into it, and we are asking for extra funding. We're gonna, if things go as we are, we're gonna run out of funding by the middle of the year, because word of mouth has communicated so well what the program can do. And so I just really want to encourage everybody to talk about what's important to you, what you're learning, what you do, you know, and it needs to be part of a regular conversation. Yeah. And I think that's the same with inviting other organizations or others to us as well.
Adam?
I've got a comment from the youth. You talk to the youth of our community about this, and you know what they'll say? It's a bunch of gray-haired people sitting in a room talking about not doing anything. Lack of guts. I mean, that's truly what the kids are saying. And, you know, how do you be an earth optimist when you've got a bunch of gray-haired people sitting in a room talking about how good they are and not doing anything?
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, these are words of our youth. These are not Adam Chambers, because I'm a gray-haired person sitting in the room talking about all the things we could do. So we've got to get out there and do something.
Yeah.
And we need to set a pathway to real action, not patting ourselves on the back because I, you know, walked a block to get here type deal.
Yeah, so part of it, yes, actually a couple of things, but also, Joanna, did you want to say something?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for putting this panel together, and thank you all for sharing, because I was able to learn things. I mean, I listen to the radio and I read the newspaper, but I still don't really know what is going exactly on in everyone's individual organization, so this is a way to get it out. And thank you so much for just saying that, Adam, about our kids wondering what we're doing, and still there's so much to do. It looks like we're doing so much, but we keep hearing there's still so much to do. So anyways, first off, I'm a mom and had this exact same conversation with my 2 kids, and they're like, what can we do? We want to do something. We want to be making a difference. So I wasn't planning on revealing this right now, but I will. So, to a room full of people, we started a tree planting organization, essentially. And we've raised a little bit of money, and we've bought 1,000 baby trees. And our goal is to get them in the ground this summer. We're looking for places to plant them, and anyone who wants to help planting. So that seemed like it was a good, one of those things that might be missing in all the work that everyone's doing. So it was
actually,
my
that's
kids,
great timing.
led by
No.
my kids, saying, let's start something, let's do something, let's get our hands dirty. So we
Great.
took the leap, and I'd love to partner with anyone in this room who wants to help out with that.
So we are actually launching a tree planting initiative, and I've been describing it, maybe you didn't see it, but it's been a part of one of the actions coming out of this launch event. A public-private partnership of some kind. We're defining what it'll look like, but I just appreciate your willingness to work it out, with me. And for starters, I did ask Megan if there are private landowners who already know they want to plant trees. And we don't know, right? I own property on the river, and I want to be sure I'm planting the right trees in support of the bigger ecosystem. How do we start to educate ourselves better just at that place? What are the trees that we could be planting? And then what are other initiatives that we could be looking at supporting the Forest Service in? The Telluride Rotary Club, I'm a member of, and Alex has expressed support too for this as a potential project that we could explore through Rotary particularly. We're very excited to get out there and start planting trees. So what do you think is a good way to actually be effective here and do this together?
So when Madeline mentioned the idea, I was like, that is a phenomenal idea. I think every community should have one of these. So high five across the room that you already got as far as you did. I know it's something that the National Forest Foundation is already investing nationally, and I'm assuming also in this community. Remember, I've only been here 2 months, but I bet if we were to look, they're already working on it. But what I brought with me was a resource that really highlights a lot of the Colorado State Forest Service opportunities, where if you want to identify nurseries, seedlings, where to buy things. And then the other really neat resource on here is that I try to figure out, well, which trees should I plant on my property, right? You put an aspen in a place it doesn't want to be, it's just not going to survive. So and I see a lot of sad aspens out there on private property. So
And
anyway,
cottonwoods.
yes, and cottonwoods, yes, yes. But anyway, I digress. So on this piece of paper, there are those resources at the bottom, and at the top, I just put a little agency propaganda in there. This is a link to all of our climate solution resources and things that we know about our region individually. And so I think what I'll do is just go plop this on the back, and feel free to grab it on the way out. And so my initial reaction to Madeline was, awesome, let's work on this, but that's all I've got, so we'll circle back around. We'll circle back around.
I put out a sign-up
Tree
sheet just
nursery,
for
I plant
this.
hundreds of trees every year.
Do
They're
you?
not native species, but I'm doing lots of fruit trees. I also
That's
do an
exciting.
enormous amount of guerrilla gardening.
So
Whether
you
or
got,
not I own
there's
the
a
land.
sign-up sheet on the back. If you're interested in the tree planting initiative here,
Like,
please do
trees are
sign
really
up.
free.
Oh.
Apricot,
thank you.
peach, apple.
That's exciting.
Say more? All right, and the other to mention, we're going to be offering a Drawdown Workshop, which I'm just thrilled about, and that's actually what got us started really in thinking an education series would be worthwhile, and that this really mattered first to understand the context. Are you who's familiar with Drawdown? Yeah. So we've had some great presentations here. We'd like to offer the workshop at an overview level. A lot of people in the community haven't yet experienced it. And so 80 of them already exist, 20 of them are coming soon attractions. I actually just heard Chad Frischman, who's the vice president for Drawdown, present. My day job is with IBM, and I invited him to present to a green community within IBM. And it's amazing, the calculations that he and his team, and I know Adam, have contributed to, and the science behind this. So if we were just to really get serious about the 80 solutions, we would achieve Drawdown. If we got to the 20 as they become available, that just accelerates our progress. But it is incredibly hopeful and positive, and I think a way to bridge to people who aren't in the room yet. There's a lot of business value to the solutions. There's a lot of ways that others can be perhaps better able to understand, the road forward, Chris, to your point, like visioning our future with the solution framework. So March 30th, we're going to be offering that workshop. And then coming out of that, if there's interest, I would love to spawn projects and do pilots, proof of concepts that we could collaborate with together as a community on the Drawdown solutions as projects and proof of concepts.
I'd encourage everybody to get on that email list so you can be informed of things that fall within the series. I promise not to put you on any other list. About things that fall under this purview.
And speaking of the mailing list and Drawdown, and what Adam had mentioned about carbon offsets with the bus system, and speaking of what can we all do, We have our company, our work van, and we we're looking around at how we can carbon offset our van, right? We can't buy an electric one yet, they're not available. So every single one of you can actually go online, and if you don't have an electric car and you can't bicycle to work every day or take a family vacation on a bicycle to California, you have a car, and it's a gas guzzling car, you can go online there. If you did sign up for the email, we can send you there's a lot of shady sort of offsetting, but there's gold standard real offsetting organizations. And it's not that costly. You do a little formula, how many miles per gallon do I get? How much do I drive on average a year? They figure it out. You pay them, it's not that much, 20, 30, 40 bucks. And they actually offset the gas that you use for your car in that year.
How?
There's different types. Do you remember one of them? They'll plant trees. They'll put it into composting. Do you remember what else?
The tree planting ones were the ones
Yeah.
that come.
And you could choose which one you like,
I'll tell you the accounting on it. So if you buy a third-party verified carbon offset, that has to prove that something called additionality. So you start your car up and it emits a ton of gas. You have to prove, if it's third-party verified and listed on a registry in the United States, it has to prove that it's additional. So you can work with tree planting in a burn area not on public land. It's got to be on private land because it has to be additional. Public land, they say, public land is going to provide these services to everybody anyhow. So it's a pretty complex methodology, and then those are listed. We work with a farmer in Lamar who implemented practices, and he has to, they actually restrict his deed for 99 years.
And it's a huge amount of land, it's 16,000 acres, it's
Yeah.
not just somebody's backyard or tiny little farm, it's a huge property
And-
that was going to be encroached upon.
Yeah, so there are a bunch of different styles of carbon offsets out there, and some of them have water quality benefits as well. Some of them have grass-fed beef benefits, which are called co-benefits as well. But the farmer in this case farms carbon and farms grass-fed veal. That's his choice that's where he makes his living. So.
I'm curious, in the audience, a couple of years ago, I just had a little informal group talking about affordable housing. We met every month. Is that something that people would be interested in? Or it might be better to do the drawdown framework, but again, our question is, we've all been doing bits and pieces of this. How can we bring more, how can we amplify what we're doing? And how can we bring people who, like you, are here, might not be involved in a specific thing, but might want to be if you learned about it. So that's a question to use. How can our community best up our game here?
I would say frame it as a moral imperative. Just guilt trip the heck out of it. That's what happened for me.
Yeah,
I said to Rudy Eisner 43 years ago, I'm an environmentalist. And he's turned to me and he goes, do you have a driver's license? I said, yeah. He goes, you're not an environmentalist. So the guilt worked for me.
Yeah, I think there's many avenues that can work, and that definitely is one of them.
And there's green jobs in light manufacturing
Right.
here.
The green jobs thing, I think, is huge. Working with the West End Economic Development Group, their whole transition away from being a coal-based community is really interesting to look at, and we're working on glamping project out there, as well as the Pinion Homestead project and Wild Gals Market in Nukla. Their recipes look amazing. So yak industry, yeah. So I feel like if we can start to capture some of these ideas and then put it out there and by word of mouth or in all the effective means, then we can up our game. And I think that's kind of one of our goals here is it's not just us or not just our organization. It's like we need to really motivate everybody to be part of.
Harvesting wild edibles really puts a dent in your carbon footprint. No grocery store, no truck, no money involved, go out and pick it and eat it.
Yeah, it would be.
Delaney?
I think there's another thing that we can do to up our game, and this is a shameless plug for something I've seen about 4 different presentations, maybe 5, and that is, we are in a new decade and the census is
Oh,
coming.
yeah.
And for the state of Colorado, this potentially means another seat, another representative seat in the nation, which means another state loses it if we get it. It sounds very subjective, having everyone counted in the census, but it's actually very objective. It equates to approximately $2,300 per person, per month. Is that right?
Per year.
Per year for 10 years.
For 10 years.
And if you exponentially think of how many people are not being counted, that equates to grant money in a lot of cases. And a lot of these things that we want to do, we're gonna need to get a lot of grant money to help us, because I think I can speak for the 3 local governments in this vein. That's the one thing that we could run short of if we have another recession, or if we have to provide 100 EV charging stations because everybody wants EV cars. It's just a very big deal. So census, tell your friends, if you have a P.O. box, you can do it online. You can go to Tri-County Health, they have their website, they have a lot of information about it, and just remember that, please.
Awesome.
And if somebody does have an idea that needs some extra funding, we're finishing off our first year of Telluride Green Grants funding, which is implementing quite a few number of projects around the region that are around Telluride that are reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the next round, the application cycle will start this fall. So if anybody has a project that needs extra funding, come talk to us about it. Let us know and keep that in mind, that the funding cycle will start this fall. The CDPHE has compost and recycling types of grants out every year, and the next cycle for that is also this fall for small projects. That's how OFER got our start with funding, and then doubled our program. So, and we've got, Eco Action Partners has gotten experience now. The town of OFER has gotten experience at running this small composting program, and we're staying up to speed on what's going on with others in the region. So if you're interested in composting, let us know as well.
I just want to do a shout out too, because Joanna with Carbon Neutral Coalition, one of the projects, the big project we've been trying to figure out is how to get solar on the school.
Yeah.
And so in Telluride, and so that's, it's a big ticket item. They're looking to replace the roof. We're trying to kind of put those two things together. But if you have ideas on funding for the school in particular, it's a pretty hefty price tag. It's not just a bake sale item, but.
We're actually looking for someone in the community who might need a $500,000 tax credit.
There you go. But again, word of mouth, it's like so much of it is.
All right, we're almost at the end here. I would love to do just a quick thumbs up, down, middle, for how was this? How was this event? Okay, cool. Would you like us to do it on a regular basis, like twice a year with a panel like this?
Quarterly, monthly?
Twice a year?
Daily.
At least.
And
Or
if
even every
there,
quarter, as the seasons
Yeah.
change.
if there's interest, Chris and I have talked about a monthly gathering, like you did for the affordable housing. Would there be interest in that? Anyone for monthly?
Not this.
Quarterly?
If we did a quarterly larger group meeting, and then people could break off into little, they're like a compost group or.
And we wouldn't always have this format, just to mix it up for sure. It could be more tables, maybe transportation, ag, and so we'll play around with formats. We welcome your thoughts on best format, but this felt important, just to make sure. There's so much amazing knowledge, wisdom, insight in each of these heads here, and just to share, and again, be filming it for the broader community. So thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
I'd just like to shout out.